Welcome back. We're still talking the resolutions of the National Assembly weighed against the Constitution and the operations of the executive. Mr. Bayami, you said something earlier about government being not with the legislature,
Yes.
but with the executive.
Yes.
Okay. We're not arguing that. But the executive is there and guided, its operations is guided by the laws
Yes.
made by the legislature.
Yes, yes.
Now, the Constitution
Yes.
is the
The
Bible
we
or
call it the
Grundnorm
Grundnorm, the fundamental law
for operating this nation or
yes.
for working this
Yes.
nation. So if security is a principle, a guaranteed principle in the Constitution, security of lives and property, if that is not being followed through, would you say the executive is running the government as it should?
Let us appreciate that issue of security is shared. Responsibility for security is shared by the three arms of government. It's shared by the legislature, which makes the law to ensure security of property, persons and property. The executive that executes the law and the judiciary that regulates. They all share it. But let us understand something, that the president has only one single job in the Constitution, apart from his power that is prescribed, and that is ambassadors, his own cabinet, prerogative of mercy that is given. He has only one single job: to execute the laws and the Constitution. That's all the job he has. There's no other prescription for him. As to how he governs, it is his prerogative. He's regulated in two ways. If he violates the law, gross misconduct with particulars, because the people did not give the legislature the power to do just anything. Because the legislature does not represent them in terms of governing them. It represents them in terms of making law to govern them.
Okay.
So let us understand that.
Okay. Now, Mr. Sobo, the president's only job is to
execute the law and the Constitution.
The laws of
That's
the
what the
nation.
Constitution says.
Yeah. But among the resolutions that the National Assembly drew up is also that part about respect for the rule of law, which has been seemed to not be going well, you know, where the executive is concerned. So is that not one thing you can chalk down under the list that you're making for the impeachment of the president?
First, I disagree with what's been said about that governance only rests with the president, and that goes
executive.
with the executive, and that goes to your question. You see, democracy is shared responsibility. It is not. It does not reside in one person. That's what they call it. The government of the people, by the people, for the people. In that parallel, you have the executive, and you have the representative of the people, who are with the legislature. Yes, if you look at anything narrowly enough, you can box them. And there have been narrow interpretation of this Constitution to the effect that, you know, you just box issues. The executive, the legislature makes laws. Those laws must be executed. If those laws are not being properly executed, they have the power to call the president to order. And that is fundamental of the Constitution, or the arrangement of government. So they make laws that, okay, people should not go out at night or whatever, so as to protect them. And the president is not doing that. We are talking about killings here now. We're talking about people's lives. These are the people who...
Every day.
Every day. And the legislature look at that and say, well, this is not good, because you have the responsibility as the president to execute the law that protects life. That is the number one objective of the government, the protection of lives and property. Every other thing comes after that. So, and they see that. The killings are going, security is going down, and they call the attention of the president, we are not executing this properly. Yes, they have the right to call him to order. And if he does not listen, he can go down to the issue of impeachment. I'll give you an example that where we copy our democracy from. There's just one sentence about impeachment for high crimes and misdemeanor. The Constitution is not going to sit down there and say, well, one, if you slap somebody on the street, if you wear a blue tie, or if your shoes are not shining enough. No, it gives the ground broad enough so that other things can come under that when the legislature, when the legislative branch sees that. If the president doesn't like it, he can always go to court because you still have the judiciary there. But to say, it saddens me when we look at the responsibility to protect lives, and what did they say? We're dealing in semantics. These are people who are dying, and the representatives of the people are the primary responsibility of them is to make sure that the government protects us all, and that's what they are doing now. Whether or not it becomes a threat or not is another issue, or whether under that threat you can look at the particular actions of the government and say that rises to the point of gross misconduct.
Let me read this out. Said the president must be held accountable for the actions of his appointees and must be ready to sanction those that carry out any act which will ridicule or endanger our country and democracy.
Of course.
With due respect.
Of course.
That's a non sequitur. What do you mean by it should be? All the appointees are his agents. You don't need to state that.
So it's a given.
So it's a given.
He holds himself responsible. The Constitution holds him responsible. So
okay. Going by this.
Yes.
Let me put it this way. So if from what you said now, that means they are correct in this resolution they took.
Yes,
the president
it is not a resolution. It's just a...
Okay.
They're stating a fact.
It's stating something unnecessary.
Okay.
It's necessary.
Please go ahead.
So if it is there,
yes,
going by the Constitution,
yes,
he holds himself responsible.
Yes.
The Constitution holds him responsible.
Yes.
And if there's a breach of that,
yes, he cannot be impeached. Let me explain to you. We're now looking at two jurisprudence that are essential. Define this issue. American jurisprudence. It says that the president can be impeached for high crime.
And misdemeanors.
And misdemeanor. Wait. Just wait. It didn't say for crime. It says high crime. Listen to that.
So there are classes of crime.
And the most important case in the entire constitutionalized jurisprudence in the world is a case that is called Marbury against Madison. I think it was decided in 1801 by Justice Marshall. He says, why is law reduced to writing if it is not to guide the affairs of the state? Now, in Nigeria, it says, talks of gross misconduct, not misconduct, gross misconduct. Now, it says furthermore that gross misconduct is not sufficient. You must particularize. Let us understand that.
Lawyers.
we must appreciate that. And the reason is very simple. The reason why it makes it difficult is because the legislature that is supposed to make law in its own personal interest can threaten the executive. I give you a simple example. The Nigerian legislature today is a threat to this nation in terms, and I will tell you why. In terms of the consumption of the wealth of the nation, a legislature makes something like about 29 or 30 something million a month. A Nigerian citizen makes 18,000. A Nigerian citizen will work for a period of 300 years, hard labor, to make an annual salary.
Okay,
or even a monthly salary of a legislator. If we are talking of gross misconduct, nothing, that is high gross misconduct.
Okay, so the legislature checkmates the executive.
Yes.
Who checkmates the legislature?
Who
can bring this up?
Very good. Can I will finish. You will have your time. Who checkmates the legislature? Yeah. The executive. Because executive is the one that controls the purse. The legislature.
I can't see the executive bringing up this issue of the remuneration, for instance, and dealing with it.
They're doing it because every time they raise this issue, in this last term, budget. It was I even wrote to the president. You know, the vice president was in charge at that time. The president was abroad on medical. I wrote to the vice president. The problem is that every time even in the time of Obasanjo, I wrote to Pius Ayim on this same issue. They were threatening the president on this issue. Every time the president tries to curtail their illimitable appetite, they begin to threaten the president with impeachment. This is the problem. Now, and we need to stop this nonsense.